What is it with the middle of the day? All right. It says we're streaming on both. I see nothing on my end now. Let me refresh.
I see Twitch.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
Twitch is there.
All right. Okay.
I don't see YouTube yet.
Still waiting on YouTube though.
Is there?
It is super irritating because we've been here before. Okay. Let me edit the. Let's see if I can do this. No.
I feel like instead of like a starting soon screen, we need like a my irritated face screen.
Yeah, well, I just don't understand like why everything seems fine. Everything seems like
Yeah,
it's
Zoom is
right.
literally telling me that we're streaming on YouTube.
Yeah.
There we are.
Okay.
Irritated face. Nope. Yep.
All right.
Okay.
So mine is still not showing, but actually,
Well, I'm watching it. It is there.
all right. Well, you keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and watch on YouTube on my Twitch. All right. So hi guys. If it isn't a technology problem, it's not us co-streaming. So
What you know what? I feel like it's in line with it's 300 degrees outside. In order to keep my skin on, it's pinned to the back of my head. Like,
and I have double electrolytes.
yes, me too. My coffee is also losing its skin. It's dying, and I have to like uphold that. And then I also keep a thermos cup in my office so that I can put a water bottle in it and it'll stay cool.
Oh, it's like a water bottle cozy.
Yeah, until I'm ready to drink it.
Nice.
It's hot in here, and I would only be in here in this kind of heat to do this kind of thing, to be with you, stuff for people that we love.
Oh. Yeah, I was contemplating doing the stream from my couch where I could have a fan blowing directly at my face instead of having to buffer my air conditioning sounds, but I
It's the
decided to
same
just go
here.
ahead and yeah. Ugh, it's the worst, you guys. And Jill claims that we're going to be getting a reprieve, right? I'm not feeling it yet.
Supposedly, like after Wednesday or something, at least in Mass. I don't know about you people further south.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we're getting maybe we got your weather a day later. I don't know. I can't keep up anymore. It's just like I get up in the morning, I go get the go to get the mail, and I'm like, it's too hot to be alive. I just go back inside. And then, I think we both talked about our hair. I've got this like Justin Bieber swoop going on.
The fact that you can even have a swoop, I literally got out of the shower and was like, there's no blow drying anything, and I just let it air dry in the car, and then my hair was like this big. So just be
I
thankful I
know
took
it
a
well.
shower.
Yes, I know the feelings well. So I just realized I had jazz playing in the background. I don't know if anybody could hear that but me, but
I did not hear that. No.
so happy Monday, you guys. Um, obviously Jill is here. We've got a fun thing to do. We're trying to do a co-stream today. Um, hopefully it's working.
Nope,
Um,
it looks Druid. I've got Druid in the YouTube. I see Maradim and Druid on the Twitch. I think we're good.
okay. Yeah, for some reason on my end it's still not showing. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, you know what? That's okay because you're the one that has to play the video. Or do you want me to play the video?
We'll have to see if it doesn't play through YouTube. You may have to play it, but all good, all good. I guess let me do all of the zillion announcements we have, and also some cool stuff I happen to have on my desk right now. And then I am going to read a little Sally Garrett piece that I ran out of time to read last week. And then we're going to get into this whole material culture thing. Let's see. Putting my phone on airplane mode, so don't text me anymore, Jill. The reason why, just to let everybody know, the reason why I have to go on airplane mode with my phone is I have an app on my computer that it mirrors my phone. So every time I get a text message or a notification, it like takes over my computer and like I can't hear anything and like
Wait,
it's
if
terrible.
if that's true, how on earth do you hide quilt purchases from your husband if your computer tattles on you?
It just goes ding ding and like cuts out the sound. That's what it does.
But I mean, so like this, is he trained every time it ding dings to go, "What'd you buy now?"
No, no, he's completely oblivious to everything. So it's all good. Well, first of all, just a little tiny bit of fun. I just showed Jill this. How many, and I know Druid, you probably did. How many people had play school, little people? I got the mama and a sewing machine. And look at her comfy little chair, her little barrel back chair that she can sit at her sewing machine with. And then here's the little blonde child who's gonna feed the sewing machine with pins.
So, and does that sewing machine actually like have like a little quilt on it?
It's a little it looks like it's probably drapes or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's some sort of little thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's cute.
I didn't have those, but play with them elsewhere. Yeah. I had a few little people. And these are the wooden ones. These are the really old ones.
Is the
Um,
kid there to put pins in the sewing machine?
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, it came with, the mother and child, and I happen to have been a little blonde child like this. And then my mom actually has darker hair, so I might have to color her hair. But yes, me and my mom. Um, I did not have, oh, you collect little people, Mario Dim. That's awesome. I had a weird car park thing with my little people. You could put the car up and it would drive to, I don't know what the deal with that thing was, but I never had a house. So the sewing machine, this was something new to me. So
And where are they going to live? Right at your desk?
they're gonna have to live at my desk with my other things for now. So I've been looking for some type of display for my my children's stuff. So, I have a bunch of play sewing machines and then I have like toy irons. I got that when I was with you, I got that little toy clothesline set with the little clothespins.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I have all of those little things and I don't really have a good place to display them. You know, they're um they're a little more durable than like the fancy sewing tools and things that we both collect, but still they're little things. They're tiny things. They're like needlework tools that, like my little dollhouse one that
Mm-hmm.
this was also a recent acquisition. And this is beautiful. These little plastic things cost nowhere near as much as, say, an antique sewing tool.
Uh-huh.
This one actually works. I don't know. I know I showed this a while back, but
I think I have one of
it,
those.
yeah, it actually works. So, um, anyhow,
Hi, Robin.
sewing toys. So anyway, I'm on the lookout for some kind of smart, interesting storage display solution. I just, other than a cabinet or like shelving, I can't figure out how to display this stuff. So
I was
for
gonna say,
now, it's
without
just
one of those things, you're probably like SOL. Like,
I know, but I mean, it needs to be like I don't know. It needs to be the kind of thing that's like not taking up floor space because that's at a
I
premium
feel like you
here.
need to send me some pictures of your space so I can offer suggestions.
Yeah,
Because
and
I have
the
no
thing
idea what any part of the inside of your house looks like. Like none. Other than your stairwell where you hang quilts. I have no idea what your house looks like. You're a
well, I
creature
hide
of
it.
mystery.
I hide it because there's piles of quilts and shit everywhere.
I feel like of all the
Um,
people that would judge you, it would not be me.
oh well, I judge myself. Um, but I go back all the time, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here. You guys will get this. If you are a quilter or a textile person, or really any kind of, handcrafts, whether you're a knitter or you end up with supplies and they can take over. And I mean, I am an artist. So, and my quilts are not necessarily just, fabric. Many of my quilts have three-dimensional aspects to them. So I have other supplies and tools. And I just live in a small house, and my husband's always like, you fill this place up. And it's like, no, not really. I think it's easy to say, like, no matter how big of a space you get or how small your space is, we tend to fill them up. Um, but there is definitely rhyme or reason to all of my stuff. It's just I don't have storage. That's the real problem.
Mhm.
And I don't have any way to spread out.
That is a downside to antique homes, is they
Hmm.
lack a lot of storage that more modern
Yeah.
homes have.
To give you guys point in case, I don't have closets. No closets. There is one little cupboard type thing that's in my bedroom.
Hmm.
My husband has like all of his jeans and t-shirts and things in there. And it's not deep enough to be a closet. It's only about like that deep. So think about like a hanger.
Hmm.
It lacks about 4 inches to be able to put a hanger in there. So it doesn't have a hanging rod. It's just got these shelves in there. So anyway, all of our clothes are hanging on a rack that sits in our bedroom outside of, because I just don't have anywhere to put them. And we've got, furniture and stuff that piles and piles of supplies, boxes and boxes. Yeah. Like I have the clear tubs and all of the little wire things and stuff. And it just gets overwhelming at times. Yeah, I do. Well, and Mardim, you say that. I do. A wardrobe would be great. I mean, I'd have to get rid of the rolling rack, the clothing rack, and put, that piece of furniture there. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's something that we've been talking about for a while, but
Well, and historically, whoever lived in your home originally would have used pieces of furniture as
mhm.
closets than
Yeah,
actual.
well, and
They
they
had
also probably
some
had,
closets, but
yeah, they probably also had 2 changes of clothing and like a couple of quilts.
well,
Whereas
I
I
don't
have
know
like
if we're talking about the Victorian period where they packed their houses full of stuff. But
yeah, and I don't know well, I have a little teeny bit of information about the owner of the house during the late Victorian period, like up to I think she sold the house in 1920 something.
mhm,
So like the teens and maybe like she may have moved in here around 1890-ish.
mhm.
So we've kind of got that end period. And she actually was the wife of a general store owner.
I think you might have said this before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was this wild story about they actually owned a general store kind of catty cornered to my street. So it's like within walking distance. And there were intruders one night. They lived above the store. It was her husband. Can't remember how many kids they had. Some of them lived at home. Some of them were still, small children. Some were old enough to be out on their own. And then I think they had 2 employees. They were like shop helpers or whatever, and they stayed there too. And the shop was broken into, and the man, the owner, he went out chasing after these people that had broken in, and they shot and killed him.
Oh
And
my.
to this day, it was never solved. But it was the largest funeral to that point that had been held in Baltimore County, which is, outside the city. We're 14 miles outside the city, which late 1800s wasn't just next door. It was a little bit of a ride or a drive. So anyway, there's this pretty well-known story. It was in the Baltimore Sun, about this man's murder. And she was pregnant when it happened. And so her one child was born after her father's death. So, there's this whole story there about them. And so she at some point had, owned this house. And he Jan, and then sold it to her daughter briefly, and then there were 2 more owners after that. So yeah. And I don't know, in terms of this Victorian era, I don't know that I have no proof whatsoever that she was in here with, elephant foot umbrella stands and all that stuff. It's entirely possible, but something tells me that,
Not
the
likely.
furniture was, yeah, like they definitely did not have the big overstuffed couch with the denim slipcovers like I have, which take up a lot of room. So yeah, it probably wasn't as difficult for them, but nonetheless, definitely she was not filling her house with tiny play school sewing machines. So anywho, well, so announcements. We've chitted and chatted.
I told you we would.
I know. So announcements. Tomorrow, of course, we have we're closing in on the last chapters of Crazy Quilts by Penny McMorris, and that's on YouTube. Jill and I do that book club on Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Then we're going to be switching to a patchwork pillowcases. And this is actually written by our friend Anne Hermes. And so that is very exciting. In between those 2 books, Jill has gotten some footage from the New England Quilt Museum and a very cool show, Stitch Punk, which also included some crazy quilts from the New England Quilt Museum. So we'll be looking at those as, so it's not tomorrow, but tomorrow a week, right? Next week.
The 23rd.
Yeah. Also this week on Wednesday is a double doozy because at 2 p.m. Eastern is my textile talk about the 2024 Artist James Scholars. So I will be doing that at 2 p.m. Eastern. And then Wednesday night, Jill and I will be doing Needlework Nights, which we do every other week. And this week is the paper souvenir needle books. So there's that. Oh, very important that I meant to say. And I posted a little calendar of some important dates the other day on the Cake TV Facebook page. But just to let you know, I'm going to skip this Thursday's stream so that we have the pop-up on Saturday. Jill and I were talking earlier. I'm like, I cannot add another stream. I'm like, I'm exhausted this week already, and it's only Monday. So just because I have so much going on and we've just got a lot in general.
We have a lot going on behind the scenes too.
Yes, yes. So Thursday will be canceled. I'm going to call that my vacation day, and we're going to pick up the stream on Saturday. Now, Saturday is going to start at 11 a.m., and we are going to be looking at Dana Balsamo's auction. So it'd be very exciting. We've scoped it out. Some of you guys might have as well, and there's just such cool quilts in there. I believe some are from the collection of Bobby Ogg, who I'm not familiar with, but we'll look into that before the stream on Saturday. So I think that's everything. There's so much.
And if anyone wonders what I keep looking at, I am working on the cotton project while we're yakking.
That was the other thing. I have mine ready to go. I have traced out design on my fabric. Yeah,
dude,
I did that the
other night. Such an underachiever.
Actually, let's see. What did I do with it?
Where's your little box?
My little box must be sitting back there on my table. While I was talking to you earlier, I moved it around and I must have moved it off the desk. So, hey, Mod Art. So yeah, I'll show that. We'll look at that next time. Maybe I could get some stitching done on it. So yeah, that's exciting. I'm glad you're working on yours too.
That in the reason I was reminded to kind of work on this, especially while you're gonna just like take a quick peek at that Sally Garut thing, was we're halfway through the Mary Witherwax sew along that you just posted the other day. I am not halfway through. I am super behind. I did take some stitches into it though yesterday while I was watching a documentary that I went like down this rabbit hole. But it just reminded me today, if I am potentially going to use some of those blocks to use this cotton on to do a little, which to be honest with you, this is my picked cotton. I probably have enough, but I'm like, I need something to do with my hands, so I'm not just like looking into nothing. So I'll just keep picking away. But that reminded me about that project. So many projects.
I know, right? Yeah, we keep picking up projects and finishing some of them. Well, we're gonna get there, you guys. We promise. It's just gonna take us a while. Um, oh, one thing I wanted to show before. So I'm gonna read a little piece by Sally Garut that I mentioned the other day. But before we get to that, the new issue of Piecework magazine is out. Um, oh, Mara, that's awesome. You introduced your daughter to Mary Witherwax. That is so cool. I cannot wait to see what you guys do. Yeah. So speaking of Mary Witherwax, our friend Dawn, who is the mother of the Mary Witherwax pattern book, she is in Piecework magazine again. So anytime you ever see a needle roll or something, your first question should be, is that Dawn Ronigan? Because it is. I knew she said she had something coming up, and I think Jill and I had kind of put it together that she might be doing another piecework project. I know she's had like 2 or 3 over the past couple years, and I'm a longtime subscriber to Piecework. So this one is this very cool sewing roll. It's a mending kit basically. So you can see it's got, the place to put threads and scissors and all that stuff. So I have not had a chance. It literally just came in the mail this morning. So I have not had a chance to look through it yet. But I'm excited about this. And of course, we always love to see, yeah, so it's got instructions and everything. So
it's a really good magazine too, that has a whole variety of needlework type related things in it.
Yeah, I sometimes I get irritated because it does have a lot of knitting and crochet and tatting and things in it. But they really do this incredible job of recruiting and accepting written articles about like history and all kinds of cool stuff. So, yeah, this is one of only a handful of magazines that I actually subscribe to and read. So,
and
anyway,
I feel like
just
it
wanted
flies under the radar. I feel
it
like
does
it needs
a little bit.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think it needs a little more promotion. Yeah.
Well, it's got an interesting history because Piecework was one of those ones that was part of the Interweave family for a while. And it's a magazine that's been around for a very long time. And my mom used to subscribe to, and that's like how I got to know it. But they were part of one of those, like the investors come and wreak havoc. And, Fons and Porter, they were part of one of those Wall Street investors, they come in and say they're going to infuse cash and they basically shut stuff down. Well, that almost happened to Piecework. But the original editor of Piecework, like I guess she was the founder, she came in, opened a new business in order to take Piecework back. So that's she, and it's published by Longtail Media now. So yeah, Longtail Media, I think. So they have
you just know like all the hot goss, huh?
Yeah, I do. Not all the hot goss. But anyway, they have a podcast, a bunch of different stuff. And they actually have a cool thing if you subscribe that you can they have different levels of subscription where you can access like all of their past publications and stuff. It's a pretty good deal if you're into this. So anyway, they're not paying me. But you know what, Longtail Media, if you wanted to pay us, we would shill your magazine because it's a good magazine. So anyway, just wanted to plug our friend on. Yeah, you can buy this online, I think, as a PDF if you don't have it in your local bookstore. So I think that is everything I wanted to mention. So let's read this from Sally Garut. And did I print where it was from? I did not, but hold on a minute, I can tell you. Because the reason why I knew about this article, and it is from Joyce Gross's publication. So it's from Quilter's Journal in 1978. So it's summer 1978. And she wrote a couple of articles, but this one was interesting to me because this is about scrap quilts, not crazy quilts. Although Penny McMorris referenced this article and another one in her Crazy Quilts book. But I just thought this one was kind of sweet and charming. And I read the first page and I thought, we'll read both pages here online. So
Okay.
again, Quilter's Journal, which was Joyce Gross's publication. And Sally Garrett wrote this in 1978. And it's called The Scrappy Mother. Although many writers, beginning in 1929 with Ruth E. Finley, have said that the earliest and original patchwork quilts must have been crazy quilts, I believe this to be unlikely. And we know. Today we know it is. The theory has been that patchwork was born in the need for patching blankets in the early colonial era when every scrap of cloth had to be put to use, and that this led inevitably to crazy quilts. The Orlovskys, while agreeing with the persuasiveness of this idea, affirm the following. Hey, Kenny, this is conjecture. There are no existing examples of this type of quilt known to the authors dating before the 19th century. Nor are there written descriptions or illustrations which would confirm the existence of the crazy quilt at an earlier date. And, you know, like at this point, with all of that history to look back at, we're like, yeah, the Orlovskys and Sally Garrett, you guys are correct. Ruth Finley was the one who was wrong. And, you know, I mean, we read Ruth Finley here, and that was the first book that we read. And I think I was frequently, as I'm going through it, going, I don't think that's right. I think she's wrong about that. There's a lot of stuff Ruth Finley was wrong. And, you know, the thing is, it kind of, to come full circle, like Ruth Finley was not a quilter. She was a journalist. So you get a lot of people writing things that, you know, are making claims that really have no experience in this world. And, you know, they perpetuate ideas that are not accurate. And I will not digress into the other areas because we have done that here too. Hidden in plain sight, anyone? So the Forefathers Song, composed in Massachusetts in 1630, is often referred to in support of the theory of crazy original quilts. And it goes as follows. And now our garments begin to grow thin, and wool is much wanted to card and to spin. If we can get a garment to cover without, our other in garments are clout upon clout. Our clothes we brought with us are apt to be torn. They need to be clouted soon after they're worn. I don't know what clout means. But I think it must mean like mending. I don't know. Patching, I guess. However, getting from the patched clothing in this verse to the phenomenon of pieced quilts is a very long jump, which skips over two practical questions. First, considering the art of mending, the wear patterns are different in bed clothing and garments. In clothing, the abrasions come at particular places, the seat, the knees, and elbows. After patching, those areas continue to be abraded and may indeed be patched more than once, clout upon clout. So yeah, that must be what clout
I
means.
just looked it up. The archaic meaning is to mend with a patch.
A patch. Okay.
Yeah.
A blanket, however, wears out very gradually in the entire center, which becomes weakened overall so that a patch will not hold. It is usually reconstructed for continued use by cutting it down the center and sewing the two sound sides together to form a new, stronger center. I thought this was very interesting. You know, I've definitely seen quilts that have been cut down. And I mean, you and I have been in places where they talk about quilts cut down, but what she's talking about is you've got a quilt, you're going to cut it down the center because it's worn here, right? Cut it down the center and then put it together like this, put it back together like this.
Interesting.
That's what she's talking about. And I'm like, have we seen evidence of that? I don't know.
Would that also mean you have to cut off the binding as well?
I would think so.
Unless you're going to make it look semi-potholdery in a way, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just people that did this were so good at it, we don't know. It just looks like, I don't know. It's interesting to me. And I was like, well, that's an interesting theory.
I don't know that I've seen anything that like that I know of.
Yeah. And this is a question to ask the people whose shoulders we stand upon, because some of our our friends who have much more experience in this than we do, if these things exist, they've seen it. So I throw that question out, you know, and I'll have to ask some particulars. So if there are moth holes to repair, darning rather than patching is preferable. Darning is a form of reweaving, which restores the woven web and is not lumpy as a patch would be. It is doubtful that patching was ever much used to restore blankets. And, you know, I think about, you know, like woven coverlets. I don't, that's probably the wrong example to use, but if you've seen those really beautiful woven coverlets that have the beautiful patterns, I mean, those, it makes sense. Those are woven. It makes sense to reweave those versus putting a patch on them. Second, the idea that colonial women made bed covers by sewing scraps together in random fashion does not seem reasonable. No random groups of scraps will fit together neatly like a jigsaw puzzle and turn out to be a large, flat, smooth bed cover. In making a quilt from scraps, the alternatives are that the pieces are A, overlapped, and B, cut to fit. Overlapping is not as easy as it seems to be. There is the problem of the edges of the pieces. They must either be embroidered heavily or turned under in order to keep them from fraying. In the colonial era, embroidery was limited to a very few stitches, blanket, chain, and stem mostly. And embroidery floss was extremely hard to come by. In a time of scarcity, embroidery would not have been used for mending. On the other hand, turning under the edges of heavy woolen fabric gives a lumpy result, particularly when several patches overlap. And such treatment of the many edges of irregular scraps is difficult and time-consuming. The other choice, cutting to fit, more nearly resembles familiar pieced work. The simplest and most economical method of cutting is to use a rectangular module as a basic pattern. Scraps which are too small to make a complete module can be pieced out to size with others. This we have seen. Just such a scrap quilt is the one pictured on the previous page, and I printed this in black and white, but you can see, I mean, it's just a scrappy, they're not squares exactly. You've got a lot more going on over on this side than you do on this side. Just such a scrap quilt is the one picture on the previous page, made about 1910. In this, no particular pattern has been attempted. Although the sizes of the pieces vary, they all have square corners and add up to equal widths so that they fit easily together. Furthermore, this type of quilt is very easy to make, being seamed, not overlapped. It requires no edge finishing. These characteristics are common to a number of early pieced quilts from England, Canada, and the United States. And then she gives a few books that reference this stuff, like Avril Colby's Patchwork, Piece Quilts of Ontario, one of the Holstein books, etc. These quilts fit the requirements of quilts made for warmth under conditions of scarcity and hardship. They do not in any way resemble crazy quilts. Further, we should not be led astray by our present understanding of the word patch. The original meaning was of a piece of cloth appliqued onto another fabric for decoration. Clout or clute. You know, I'm wondering if it's clute. It's C-L-O-U-T.
Yeah. I mean, I would look at that and think it's clout.
Well, yeah, because that's how we pronounce it today, but it might be clute. Anyway, this was the word for piece of cloth to cover a hole. As our needlework vocabulary has never included clout work or clute work as a technique, I do not think that patchwork is derived from a need to mend blankets or clothing. I believe that patchwork came from our need to make something pretty. Nor do I think that pieced quilts came only from the practical desire to use up every last bit of fabric. In colonial times, mattresses, or beds as they were called, were only large sacks filled with anything handy. Feather beds were preferred, but a bed might be filled with ends of yarn or snippets of cloth. These are called flocked beds, or leaves, corn husks, or cattail down. There were other uses for the last tiny bit of cloth. It appears to me that the homely scrap quilt made of rectangular pieces was the real mother of pieced quilts, and that the women who made the first ones were aiming to use their extra fabric in a practical and visually pleasing way. So, I mean, this just goes back like this, to me, this is kind of Tish, to me, this is like a little bit of a 101 because I do think, there was this point in time where people really had not, and not that long ago, really. I mean, this is written in 79 or 78. But I think even like quilting things that I would go to, and obviously not AQSG stuff where, you know, the people who have done the hardcore research are, but just general quilting events. And so much of this kind of stuff was still, like that colonial women made quilts because they had to be economical. They had to use up all these little scraps of fabric. And that is absolutely not true. We know now there are these beautiful colonial era quilts, and they were using fabric that was purchased specifically for the quilt. Their whole cloth quilts, or their I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the colonial era that's white work, chintz, like all that kind of stuff. We're not quite at patchwork yet. And then crazy quilts are really absolutely defined by that time period in the 1880s. As we've read the Crazy Quilts book and just learned about crazy quilts, I almost feel like any of us could win Jeopardy about crazy quilts, because like the dates 1883 and 1884 are like the pinnacle. Not to say that there weren't crazy quilts made, in the 1870s, late 1870s, or 1890s, 1900, but it's like 1884, 1883 were the years that like it just went wild and everybody made a crazy quilt. So, I think the reason why I wanted to kind of connect this, I mean, I was going to read it last week, but I wanted to connect this is because the idea of material culture is about the objects in our world, right? And for a long time, I was like, I don't know what material culture is. And it's really such a simple concept that it's almost like mind blowing that it's material culture, essentially, you guys, is everything. Everything that we use, tools, decoration, monuments, buildings, ephemera, like anything that we create and use for a purpose. And it has, we can describe its purpose. So quilt obviously fit right in there. And I think it's through material culture studies is where we tease apart the history of these objects that often people have taken for granted, because it's this thing that's, in your surroundings, and you don't necessarily think about where did it come from? Why do people do this? Why did it turn out looking this way and not some other way? So I thought that would be a good segue.
Yeah.
So what we are going to watch is a wonderful new program that is being put out by the American Quilt Study Group. And it is about material culture. And I think I talked about it a little bit last week. Jill and I will eventually be part of it. But in the meantime, it's starting off as explaining what material culture is, how it shows up, etc.
I was just gonna say, do you want me to share? Because I've got YouTube Premium, so I won't have any ads.
That would actually be really great, because I'm worried because I've got the YouTube.
You've got too much stuff going on over there.
I'm just worried like YouTube streaming is not going to like this.
Yeah.
So that might be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, then you can pause as needed.
Yes.
And make sure when you share, make sure that you choose to share your desktop audio.
Oh, thank you for that.
Our peoples will be able to hear.
Okay. Is that coming through good?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And let me my audio is currently very high. Tell me how sound's coming through.
The American Quilt Study Group presents Quilts and a Material World.
It's good. It's a little low, but I think Tara was
what is
a little bit lower than Susie.
Presented by Susan J. Jerome. Susan J. Jerome is the collections manager at the University of Rhode Island Historic Textile and Costume Collection, and the curator registrar for the University of Connecticut M. Estelle Sprague Costume Collection. She earned her MS degree from the University of Rhode Island, focusing on textile and clothing history. Ms. Jerome sits on the National Board of the American Quilt Study Group and the Costume Society of America Northeastern Region Advisory Committee. She writes and lectures on topics of clothing and needlework history.
Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Jerome, and I am delighted to be the first presenter in a series put on by the American Quilt Study Group titled Quilts in a Material World. I think for me, this quote says quite a bit about what quilts mean to women's history and to the history of people in general, particularly in the 19th and early 20th centuries. And this is one of the reasons why I am very passionate about quilts and quilts history, is that a quilt can tell you so much about a person's life, where they lived, their economic status, perhaps some of the things they enjoyed in life and such, all in the little pieces of fabric that they might have stitched together at those odd moments that they could find in their lives. So I'm going to begin with a little discussion of what a material culture is. Material culture really looks at everyday items. It goes beyond looking at history from the perspective of the famous or political boundaries or battles that were fought. Material culture looks at a group of people by looking at their ordinary things, the things that they made, the things that they used in their lives that could be dug up from the ground or found in an inventory list. The ordinary is something that James Dietz talks about in his book, In Small Things Forgotten, which is one of the first books published on material culture studies in the 1970s. What is a material culture study?
I wanted to make the point here that what Susan is talking about in terms of feminism and material culture is important to think about, because instead of studying history through the lens of famous people, we think about history, especially this history, pre-20th century history. The women are very few and far between in terms of famous people. And when you try to research women, a particular woman, you're often running into a woman with no first name, or a woman who is known as Mrs. James Jones. Like you don't know her name, you don't know where she came from. So in studying the material culture of something like a quilt, you may still not unveil the actual names of people, but you learn more about these anonymous women, in that this what we're looking at here, what she's showing, is a very scrappy quilt that very likely had garment fabric in it. And so that tells us something about what the consumption of the household, and and sometimes we're lucky enough to have a name or some initials or some dates, and that is the hand of the woman who made, or the women who made, the quilt. So feminism, I feel like, especially in this context, we've got a very nice dovetailing of feminism and material culture. I mean, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I have been like that she's talking about, how it's tools. And I had heard, because for anyone that doesn't know, my academic training is in religious material culture. And when people would be like, what's that? I'd be like, religious stuff. The people that, like, the things that people made in the name of religion is religious material culture.
Mm-hmm.
But when she talked about like the tools of, I had heard someone describe material culture as like the tools of life.
Mm-hmm.
The things you use to live. Like a quilt is for warmth or for display, or just for pretty.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know where I was going with that thought. I'm sitting here looking at this quilt going, wow, it's really pretty.
Well, I mean, I think the history of anything can be like, you can use the material culture route. I mean, if you want to do the history of your town, then you've got all the buildings in your town and the historical stuff that was created. But when we drill down into quilts, then, we have this very specific set of things. And like, there's the needlework tools, there's the quilts themselves, there's the fabric there. So all of these things, she's asking questions. Mm-hmm. So let's hear more from Susie.
I just also wanted to point out that because of the way Stephanie and I are streaming, our Zoom stream is covering Susie's up in the corner. So you are hearing her voice. And if you go and you look at the actual YouTube, which of course will be linked down, we're technically over her. You'd see her speaking. And her and I are actually wearing the same shirt.
Oh my gosh, you are.
Yeah,
Oh
same
my
color
gosh,
and
you
everything.
actually are.
But yeah, I
that's
just want
funny.
people to know that, like, if you wonder where this voice is coming from, Susie is on the screen. It's just we're currently over her. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, that's the one thing I dislike about how Zoom does
It
this.
asks the questions of who, what, when, where, why, and how. And it explores the ways in which, if you're looking at a quilt, the quilt was made, from what it was made, who may have made it, who may have used it, how was it used, and then finally asks the question, what does it mean to us today? It's a way of exploring the stories that are behind an object. And for us who are quilt historians, quilt fanatics, it's a way to look at the stories behind the material of the quilt. Questions to ask, and you can see them listed here. Who made the quilt? Do you know when it was made and who used it? All the way down to, can you find other contemporary examples of the quilt that may help to look at it as a comparison? Is it very unique, or is it a log cabin based on a, dare I say, typical log cabin quilt? Finally, a material culture study looks at, what does the quilt mean to us today? Is it in a collection? Is it considered monetarily valuable? The reasons for a quilt's existence today is really part of the history of the piece. Provenance is a way to start.
Can we pause again?
A little bit.
You know, always have a hot take on everything. But we have to pause a little bit just for copyright reasons to like overlay ourselves. But I love those questions she gives because I mean, think about it. You could literally do this kind of study on a quilt if you already know some of those things, like it's your family quilt or something. And all of those questions are the questions that we often like commiserate and are disappointed when we don't know about a quilt, right? So full circle it, label your quilts. So then people in the future don't have to go, who, what, where, when, why. It's all right there, you know, with some exceptions, unless you want to write a whole story, but just the basics of who made it, where they were, when they were, if it was made for somebody as a gift, you know, it answers so many of those questions.
Mary had made a point too on one of her streams once that she loves when someone puts how old they were when they made it as well. You know, because there's so much to say about what time of your life that you're in, what season, you know, are you 8 and just like a super overachiever where you and I couldn't tie our shoes at 8, or, you know, are you just getting married, or are you in your twilight years? You know, like there's a lot to say for everything that informs your quilt making at different times in your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
It at this particular square that you see on the right, you see it has a name on it, Mary Eleanor Bristow, and you can see that it is unfinished. This quilt came to the University of Rhode Island unfinished. It was given by what we think is the maker's granddaughter. It's supposed to be a baby quilt, and a series of blocks that have names that have been embroidered on them. When you look at Mary Eleanor Bristow's name, you can see that it has been written onto a piece of paper with her birth date to be used as a pattern for embroidering her name and the date onto a piece of fabric. It's very nice to have a quilt that has names and dates on it. All of the names and dates are of boys and girls living in the southern Rhode Island area, and their birth dates fall between 1912 and 1916. So this gives us a pretty good idea as to where the quilt was made and when it was made. Now, I could look into Google look in the internet and find many of the men still existing, doing things throughout the early 20th century, find their grave sites in some of the graveyards in southern Rhode Island. It's much more difficult to find the women. Why? Because they change their names when they get married, and they're more likely to move away from Rhode Island. However, Mary's somebody whom I could find. One of the nice things about a material culture study is it can take you down a path and lead you to actually being able to see a person. The unfinished baby quilt, dated around 1915, made with red and white cotton fabrics, embroidered with the names of children between 1912 and 1916. Mary was easy to find because she never married and she never moved away from southern Rhode Island. So we have on the right her graduation picture, and then on the left the picture that I could capture from her obituary. Curatorial information can help in a material culture study. This is a quilt that came into URI, having passed through 5 different people before it actually was donated to the university. It's a spider web or cobweb quilt that you can see. And I suspect one of the reasons why it was kept is because it was made by William Strange. There was a newspaper article that you can see on the right, dated September 1929. Mr. Strange hand sewed the quilt, has several thousand pieces in it, and he entered it into a local fair in Connecticut and apparently won a prize. These kinds of stories are part of looking at a material culture, studying a piece, gathering up information about the quilt, which leads us to the people behind them.
And I sort of feel like this
Material
might be an
culture
area, oops.
Go ahead.
So that those stories behind the quilt, I think are is kind of where we sometimes get into trouble. And I see we collectively, not you and I specifically, although you and I are always in trouble. But um, what I was going to say though is like a quilt that has passed through 5 different hands. In a perfect world, and this is possibly the case with this quilt, you know, when you see things in museums, they typically have maybe not a rock solid provenance, but they have a good provenance because, you know, museums don't want something that's spotty. Like they want to know what they're getting and where it came from. But think about all the quilts out there and the stories you've heard about them. If you've, you know, you go to a quilt dealer, oh, they have stories to tell. And we've kind of, you know, I mean, our friends, you know, in AQSG and folks that study quilts extensively are like, don't listen to the hype. You have to be able to prove it. And so that's, you know, documenting again, who made the quilt, who got it next, and so on down the line. I mean, I have a quilt that my great grandmother made the blocks. And then it ties in with my uncle, and then my grandmother finished it into a quilt. And this is over like a 50-year time period, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And now it belongs to me. So that's something like I really need to document that. And now this is not a quilt that's going to end up in a museum, but just for the purpose of making this a regular practice. You know, when it passes through so many hands, I think that bits and pieces get added on to the story, and then other important details might get lost.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I mean, it's like playing a game of telephone,
mm-hmm.
and we all know
Exactly.
what happens when we play a game of telephone.
Exactly.
But who knows? Your family quilt could end up in a museum someday.
Maybe.
Just you never
Probably
know.
not.
But if nothing, like you should definitely like write all that down because
Yeah.
you have a child.
Well,
and
the best part is some of the information is written down, and I've showed the quilt here before, but my grandmother, she embroidered a little story on the corner of it to say, you know, when the quilt was started, who started it, and who she is, and how it was finished, and all that.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Study involves the physical characteristics, and you can look at those first when you're doing a material culture study. So if you're looking at a quilt, you're going to look at the dimensions. Is it pieced? Is it appliqued? you can see the quilt on the right here is our blocks that are set on point, which is something very typical for a Rhode Island quilt. There's no border around it, there's no sashing. Again, these are characteristics of Rhode Island quilts. Once you gather all the information together, the physical information together, that's the beginning of a material culture study. Then you can perhaps look at some of the physical characteristics. One of the things that it's fun to do is to try to identify the fibers from which a quilt can be made. Often in the 19th century, you have your choice of 4 different kinds of fibers. The upper left with the sort of knobs and the striations that you see on those fibers, that's a flax fiber from which linen is made. On the right, the upper right is a wool fiber with its very recognizable scales. That wool fiber has been chewed by insects, so you can see the little bites taken out of the end. Below it, the spiral fiber is cotton. Perfect cotton spiral that you can look for when you look under a microscope. Next to it on the left is silk. Silk is probably the one fiber that we see that has very little
Pause for a sec.
characteristics.
Mama is a fan is rating us.
What?
Hi. Hi, Mama is a fan. Hi. And your audience. Thank you so much for rating us. We are in the middle of looking at it's called Quilts in a Material World. It is a program that's being rolled out through AQSG. It's on YouTube. It's free to watch, but we thought we would do a watch party today. So you guys came in at a perfect time looking at the physical characteristics of fibers.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually
in here and it's like, what is that?
Yeah. I half of me is sitting here going, oh my God, do I need a microscope now? I will also point out, Steph and I have not watched this yet. So you're seeing our raw reaction to what's in here, which was part of the idea. And I'm really like sad to admit that I have yet to investigate any of these different kinds of fibers via microscope. So
yeah, and that's, and that is an interesting thing to do. I only very, very briefly got to look at this kind of stuff when I was in school. Our textile department did have, some ability to look at things with microscopes and all that jazz. But, I was always like, who cares? Honestly, it is my interest. This is crazy. It's my interest in true crime that actually gives me some interest in this because, they look at like, well, it's a tri-lobe polyester, possibly from, a carpet or carpet fiber from a, that stuff. But yeah, this is so interesting. And I love that the wool has the little tiny insect bites in it. Like, ew,
yeah,
but also
I was wondering what that was.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And one thing that I wanted to talk about in the previous her previous slide was about collecting the physical characteristics of an object. A quilt is easy. You can measure it, you can look and say, it's got X number of patches or pieces in it. It's got, this and that. And she mentioned this is a Rhode Island quilt because blah, blah, blah. It doesn't have a border, etc. That is such a huge piece of this for people who study quilts, is trying to put it in a place and time if they don't have that information, which, that's why I'm saying label your quilts. Because without that information, they have to then become a detective. And these are the interesting things that we've been learning is like when you look at a quilt and it's got these types of motifs or this type of sashing or this type of border or this type of backing, it is a good chance, or it points to the fact that it comes from this area, this geographic area, or this community or this time period. Obviously the fabrics themselves inform that too. So all right.
Ready?
Yeah.
They look just like glass rods. Do you want to identify, if you can, the fibers of the top, the batting, the backing, even the sewing thread and the quilting threads to see what they're made out of? That's part of a material culture study. The fabrics? Are they printed cottons, silks, ribbons, and such? The ribbon that you see in the lower left-hand corner is dated 1885. And there were several ribbons in this particular quilt that was donated to the university that have Freemason ribbons from Norwich, Connecticut, 1884, 1885, which gives us a good idea not only of the dating of the quilt, of course it's a crazy quilt, so that is another clue, but also gives us an idea as to where the quilt would have been made originally, around the Norwich area. Unfortunately, this quilt was donated in 1956 by a Mrs. Mervyn Miller. And the person accepting the quilt into the university's collection didn't think to ask her what her name was. And I cannot yet find a Mrs. Mervyn Miller, either in Rhode Island or in Connecticut. So I'm still looking for her name and her information, because apparently this quilt came through her family to the university. On the right-hand side, you see this bright chrome yellow, which is very indicative of textiles from the printed cottons from the early part of the 19th century, 1830s, 1840s. And below it, you can see the blue that progresses downward to the brown fabric right below it. Again, this ombre print, which is very typical of printed cotton fabrics from the 1830s and 1840s. So these are clues as to when this particular quilt would have been made. This is
And
an
that's the
interesting
information
quilt
we
given to
chase.
the university.
Well, and it's funny because, you know, if we're showing a crazy quilt that could have endless fabrics in it, when you think about how long you could spend looking at one quilt to try to date it, because obviously it's only as old as the newest fabric in the quilt. I mean, days. You could be looking at it, you know, with, you know, I looked at it on Monday, and then I looked at it on Saturday, and all of a sudden noticed 7 new things that I didn't notice during my last deep dive. I
Yeah,
feel like
that's why scrappy quilts and crazy quilts, they're so fun, right? Because they've got so much cool stuff to look at, but then trying to put dates on, well, luckily as we've seen, the crazy quilts, for whatever reason, they dated those all the time.
Yeah.
But and then they included things like those silk ribbons and stuff that help with dates. But yeah, these kind of scrappy things can become like really frustrating if you don't have any information on them, because you have to look at every piece in there and sort of be the detective, you know. And that's where I get frustrated, just because I'm still get my feet wet with dating fabrics reliably. And so, you know, of course, the crazy quilts for me are easier because I know those are dated, but often. But like what she's showing here, or some of these older quilts, you know, it's a struggle.
Oh yeah, no, I don't really know what it takes to feel comfortable with, you know, with like your fabric knowledge. If there's like a pinnacle you can reach where you just feel I'm comfy. I have not reached that pinnacle. I'm often like, I feel like, generally speaking, my gut is correct more often than not, but that doesn't mean that I feel confident in my gut. Sometimes it just wants a sandwich, you know, like you know.
Right.
All right, here we go.
As you can see, it's on point, just blocks, no sashing, no edging, very typical of quilts in Rhode Island at the time. The red fabric is quite fascinating because it looks like, as you can see, a toile. These fabrics with the large, often printed scenes of famous people and places, or a pastoral scene, something like that. Very popular for bed hangings and curtains, other household textiles in the latter part of the 18th and early 19th centuries. So one of the graduate students at the university decided she was going to try to figure out what the toile pattern was. So she took a picture of all of the pieces of red, and then, like a jigsaw puzzle, put them together and found out that the original toile was this pattern here, which was produced in Nantes in France between 1788 and 1793. So this tells us that the quilt was made after that time, but the fact that somebody would have taken what would be an expensive fabric used for bed hangings, used to demonstrate your wealth in your house, somebody took that fabric and cut it up into little pieces, certainly suggests that the quilt was made years after that, when the bed hangings were no longer being used within the home for household furnishings. This quilt has other things to tell us as well. You look closely at it, it is in fact a quilt inside a quilt. Around the edges, you can see that there are bits and pieces of a different printed fabric inside. And when you look through a light, with a light in the back, you can see sort of a bit of the pattern. So this quilt, by looking at it closely, shows us that people were putting quilts, old quilts, inside a quilt, using that as a batting, using old textiles in order to, recycle, reuse, repurpose. Very modern ideas today.
Speaking of
The back of the quilt
sandwiches,
is interesting as the front.
I have to say, I have I don't know, at least a couple of quilts, whether it's in my personal collection or my inventory, that have something else inside. And man, the drive to want to know what's inside it,
yeah.
that is something fierce. I have not taken anything apart, but I have definitely thought on more than one occasion, like, oh, I really want to. And I mean, it's probably not anything. Actually, I think one of them might be a wool crazy, if I'm remembering correctly, which it's like, God, why were you trying to make that thing any heavier than it already was, being a wool crazy?
Right.
So half of me is like, am I helping someone by making this lighter? Because someone did want me to ship it once. The fact that, like, I feel like normally I don't ever hear about much that's inside that's really exciting. Usually it's something far more utilitarian that's inside than not. But
yeah, and usually it's because it's not in great shape anyway. So,
mhm.
but I understand the call of the, like, what does it look like?
Yeah.
And you don't want to, like, destroy an okay quilt to find out, what a not very good condition quilt inside of it is. But then again, it could be very old and more interesting than, I don't have any like that. I have one quilt that is absolutely heinous, and it's a blanket on the inside though. And I have started, I've opened up one edge just to see, because it's tied. So it's not like literally cutting through quilting, it's just tied. And I've started to peel it back, and I'm like, neither of these are very, very interesting or exciting, but it's interesting to study it. Again, it's some interesting fabric. It's a blanket where I'm like, I think I could probably pinpoint the date of the blanket. So
The front of this quilt, again, it's on point, no sashing, no edging. This variable stars from the 1830s has a much older fabric on the back. You can see across the top, the faded section suggests that the original pillar print might have been used as curtains, or certainly near a window where the sun faded the fabric. So rather than just dispose of it, because of course fabric would have been expensive at the time, the quilt maker decided to use it for the backing of this quilt. Look closely at your pieces. This particular quilt, we know, was made in Rhode Island, and it shows some interesting features, including what looks like a mistake in one of the brown single blocks. The scalloped edge line that you see suggests that this was a piece of fabric that was a second. It was discarded or would have been given away within a mill, because that's the edge of the printed cylinder, the cylinder as it went across the fabric to print it, to turn it brown. So is this fabric a second from a mill? Which leads us to ask the question, was this made by someone who worked in a mill at the time, who could take the fabric home and then just turn it into a quilt, use it as a quilt? This
It could
particular
also
quilt
be
has
a
other
person who
interesting
just happens
features
to live
to
in a
it.
mill town, in a
Mhm.
mill community, because this is exciting to see her talk about this, because my grandmother grew up in a mill town, and her mother would go where they would discard the fabric that was like this, and also like they would use it, sometimes the ends they used it to clean off the machinery, literally, like, and they didn't think of this stuff as being very useful, because it's a second, and so they would often throw it out. So I think it's good to hypothesize that it could have been a mill employee, but I think it could have just been anybody that lives in a mill town that has access to the mill's trash.
Mhm.
If you look at the floral patterns, you can see that there are at least 2 different colorways there, which again suggests this particular quilt was made by somebody who could gather together seconds from their place at which they worked and take it home and make a quilt out of it. So the unfinished quilts can be as fun as the finished ones. This is one of 3 English paper-pieced quilts tops that we have at the university, all from the same family. And the papers inside date from the late 1700s through to the 1930s. The unfinished tops have on the front of them fabrics that date from probably the 1830s, but then also into the 1930s as well. So we believe that the unfinished quilts were begun in Charleston, South Carolina, brought back to Rhode Island, and then another family member started to take them apart, put them back together and such in the 1930s. They came to us in the 1950s. There's a really interesting history to this piece, and it's shown on the back of the quilt. Why quilts are made? Well, sometimes we know, sometimes we don't know. The pocket that you can see on the left was certainly made for convenience, and it's a lovely little pieced bit of patchwork, not quilted, but certainly has a lovely variety of printed cottons onto it. The quilt in the middle was made by a woman who we know sewed for a living. After her husband, she made this quilt early in the 1860s. She married, her husband went off to war, the Civil War, and never came home. And she supported herself partly by sewing for people. The quilt on the right is a baby quilt. Latter part of the 19th century, it is small. It's appliqued as well as pieced. I'm not quite sure I would want to put a baby on it. We do know that it was made for a baby, but it really is more in celebration, perhaps something practical to use for a baby. But that, in some ways, is just my opinion. The word quilt is quite interesting because it is both a noun and a verb. Quilts
Yeah, I wouldn't put a baby on
historically
that quilt.
have been used.
What'd you say?
I wouldn't put a baby on that quilt.
No.
Babies are liable to have sticky fingers, snot, barf.
One would wonder, is that maybe the reason why it's scrappy?
Yeah,
To
if I
hide
could throw it in the
stains?
washer and dryer, different story, but
Used to cover beds. They've been used to provide perhaps something for friends that are traveling distances. We all know about signature quilts and how they can be made by a group of people if somebody is moving away, or to celebrate a birth or a wedding, something such as that. They certainly can be displays of a person's technical abilities. It can be ways to relieve stress. I mean, think of the ways that people use quilting today to become artistic, to create things, to have something to do with their hands. Quilts can be made from published designs, and those started in the latter part of the 19th century in women's publications such as Godey's Lady's Book. It can be individual works of art as well. Quilts are just such a way to express oneself. and to learn about people in the way that they express themselves. Many things affect quilt making. The technology, of course. We all know about the invention of the cotton gin and what that did to the manufacturing of cotton products in this country early in the 19th century. Technology also includes such things as the dyeing processes. 1856, the development of the first synthetic dye in England opened up a whole new world of colors in the 19th century.
Wait a minute. This picture of this boat, are those all cotton bales?
You know, I was thinking that as soon as she flipped to that slide, it kind of looks like it. Either that or that's like a I don't know.
Well, otherwise it looks like a riverboat made out of stone. Like I have
That's what I was gonna
those are
say.
all
It looks-
cotton bales. Which
I think they are. I think that's what that's
and
supposed to be.
that's a riverboat, right? Because I see the steam, you know, I don't see the wheel, but yeah, that literally looks like it's all cotton bales. I've never seen a photo.
Yeah,
like
Mario Dim is saying yes, there are cotton bales, and they look like it to me.
Oh yeah,
It's
no, they
just
totally
crazy.
look like it. Because
It's
it's definitely
crazy to
not
think that-
stone.
It's crazy to think that they have all that. Well, I mean, a cotton bale is not light. I mean, that is still something that is quite heavy once that's all compressed. But yeah, it's crazy to me that they have it like stacked up like that. I'm wondering if this is a little bit of
A dramatization.
right, Robin? I'm wondering if it's a little bit of artistic, you know, like
Well, but when you think about it, when they were hauling up cotton from the south to the north for the mills,
Mhm.
I mean, I
They
don't
needed
know.
a lot of cotton.
Yeah, I don't know how far a cotton bale would go in terms of making. I mean, I'm sure that answer's out there in the world somewhere, but you'd need a lot because there were also a lot of mills up here at the time once things really got going. So interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, I got Mario Dim is saying Navarro County, Texas is still cotton country. So
Oh,
yeah. What I was gonna say though about this is it's so interesting that she's, you know, talking about this. It's such a important piece of this. You know, I mean, fiber and all of the things that come out of fiber. So like the whole idea of like the textile like industry or the textile craft. I mean, you can take it back like to the beginning of time for humans, basically, and really nitpick it down to, you know, like the whirls, you know, that I can't remember the spinning wheel. You know what I'm talking about? The little
the drop
whirl.
spindle.
Yeah, the drop spindle, the whirl, that thing, you know, like that goes back to millions, but many years BC. Let's put it that way, like very old antiquity. And I mean, that's a piece of technology. And you know, she's talking about all this other stuff. We've got the cotton gin, and I mean, that was important to the economics of cotton. We've got synthetic dyes. But I mean, again, you could go back, like wars are waged over cotton. United States. I mean, this little quote she has from a senator from South Carolina, 1858. Well, yeah, no power on earth dares make war of cotton. Well, guess what, buddy? You know, it's gonna have a factor in the Civil War coming up real soon in your world. And they're just, I mean, like jacquard weaving informed computers, you know, like there's all of this I mean, this is why I love textiles, because they are so enmeshed with our culture. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of material culture studies you can do that have nothing to do with quilts, but you're going to get into these topics just because of the way things affect each other.
Factor as well. Politics also. As a senator from South Carolina said in 1858, no power on earth dares make war on cotton. Cotton is king. Well, we all know what happened after that. All of these things affect manufacturing quilts, the making of quilts today, making of quilts in the 19th century. Quilts are multi-layered. They are utilitarian as well as can be looked on as a kind of artwork. This whole cloth quilt that we have in our collection is simply perhaps utilitarian, but someone took the time to express their creativity in the quilting pattern, which is again on point, just like the pieced patterns, the blocks that you see in Rhode Island quilts, goes on point. It's a geometric pattern. It's not just straight lines. This consideration of an artifact brings the people who made and used quilts really to life. When you look at a quilt through a material culture study, it goes beyond just what it looks like. Is it pretty? Is it this, that? It goes into looking at the time and the place in which it was made. And then last thing to do when you look at a material culture study and you look at a quilt from various ways is to think about how the quilt, what it means to you today. There are a lot of resources, a lot of articles on quilting. You can go to such places as JSTOR. The Quilt Index includes all of the descriptive elements needed for looking at a material culture study. So it asks those questions such as what are the dimensions, what are the blocks, how is it made, da, 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 da. And you can go to that through just Googling the Quilt Index. It's a wonderful resource as well for looking up comparisons, for looking up lots of different information about how quilts can have different characteristics depending upon where they're made and such, the time period in which they're made. The American Quilt Study Group, we do a lot of wonderful things, which is why I'm here. The quilts that you saw are all at the University of Rhode Island. We have a historic textile and costume collection, and you're welcome to contact the university for more information. And finally, this is just a little bit, this is just a few of the books that you might want to look for in order to learn a bit more about quilts history, the textiles used in quilting and such. Thank you very much. Hope to see you soon.
That was so great.
Yeah. And I guess this month, right? In a week or two, we should be seeing the next one drop, I think. I think it's I think that the cadence is set as the last Thursday of every month, I think. But anyway, Susan's next one will be coming out, and she's kind of doing like a part 2 because she said she knew she had so much to talk about with material culture. She, you know, it would be a really long video if she tried to put it all in there. So her part 2 will come out, and I can't wait. You know, like I said, I get the gist of material culture. I understand. I mean, it's what we're doing when we're investigating a quilt. You know, whether it's our own personal family quilt or something that we purchased or something that we're just interested in looking at. But, you know, I mean, there are kind of those, because I'm not an academic. So I kind of always have that question in my mind, like, am I doing this right? And I think that, you know, yes, when we look at quilts, we're doing it right. But I'm just eager for more information from Susie. I mean, essentially, Susan Jerome is a professor. So you just got like a little 20-minute clip of what the kind of stuff she teaches in her classes and the kind of lectures that she does.
And now I'm just sitting here like, University of Rhode Island's not that far away from me. Like, maybe I should call her up and go pay her a visit. Because Susan Jerome's also just lovely. If you're doing any kind of research that you think reaching out to her would be to your benefit, she's a wonderful person to talk to.
Yeah, she definitely is. And I had the pleasure of hanging out with her at QuiltCon. So I learned more about you know, her personally, and she really is. She's a great person, very lovely, always willing to help. And like I said, I'm so excited to hear more. And her experience is really interesting because she's not just quilt, she's also costume. And that, like, my heart just sings when I can look at both things, you know. So her knowledge is really fun. And you know, there's a number of folks, typically academics, who are in the New England area that you know, have been connected either with universities or like historic sites. that do both costume and quilt. So I love to look at their videos and their information, because it's like double the fun and double the information. And then it's kind of exciting to see the overlaps too, you know.
Well, and those two things are so just inherently connected.
Yeah,
It's like
absolutely.
you almost can't study one without the other in some way, shape, or form. Because, well, both of those things were such an inherent part of women's lives
Yeah, the
altogether.
clothing.
Like, I immediately think of Lynn Bassett and her quilted
Well,
petticoat.
and yeah, Lynn Bassett was one person I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, Stephanie and I are supposed to be working on one to drop later in the year, related to working with museums, like Stephanie's side of being the outsider coming into work with a museum, and me from the being inside and what's available to people on the outside kind of thing that we're putting together, which there's so much to talk about and so much to share.
We got to figure out how to get it down to 20 minutes.
Well, yeah, that means like 10 minutes a person.
Yeah. We all know I can fill up 2 hours just talking about nothing. So
yeah, it's really gonna have to narrow that down a lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, while we have a few people here, is there anything that you guys have ever wondered about museums? As far as looking at things in museums? I mean, I mean, if you got something off the top of your head now, put it in the chat box. But definitely let us know if there's something that, as people who are interested in the stuff that we investigate and talk about, if there's something about museums that you've always wondered. If we don't know the answer, we can find it and put it in our talk.
Yeah, I'm just trying. I guess my biggest side of things would be things that museums might have that you don't know that they have. Like the number of people that do not know that New England Quilt Museum has a library that's open to the public, is a lot of people. Most people come in, I didn't know you guys had this. And the fact that it's a lending library, if you're a member of the museum, almost nobody knows about that. Or even I feel like, like from your side of working with museums during your Dun research, like I think people are often intimidated to reach out to a museum,
for sure.
thinking, especially if you're not an academic, I'm not part of a group that's privy to go in and work with a museum, and that's just not true. So some museums obviously can be more difficult to deal with than others, often due to staffing and things like that. But generally speaking, like you don't have to be pedigreed, to go in and work with a collection.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, we don't want to reveal too many of the secrets before we can put our presentation together. But yeah, I'm definitely excited about that, because 2 years ago I definitely was like, oh my gosh, I wish I could get into museums and look at stuff. And then I got the opportunity, Susan Jerome asking me, so do you want to do a study center about this? Please submit. And I'm like, I have to get in the museum. Oh. So thank goodness I worked that out, so I can tell that story.
And now, like I feel like you're BFFs with a couple of museums now.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, because I did a majority of my research at the Baltimore Museum of Art, and I've kind of gotten to know the librarian archivist there, and she's, we're friendly enough that I can ask her questions and she'll give me kind of the lowdown on things. And it's nice to have that relationship, just to know that I can reach out to her and she'll kind of inform me about stuff, and also give me that inside information that you kind of just don't know, like, and every museum's a little bit different too. So it's important to cultivate those relationships with people when you connect with them.
Absolutely. So we still have a little bit of time here.
Yeah.
So I have something ready to just peruse real quick.
Okay.
If you are interested.
Sure. Absolutely.
So,
anytime I don't have to do the work. on my own stream.
Well, I figured, something, you've got the dual stream. For anyone that came in late, we are streaming currently on Quilt Nerding's YouTube and Stephanie's Twitch account. So that everybody gets to see stuff. But I figure we shouldn't have you touch anything because you got this perfect ecosystem working over there. So
yes, God forbid. It is streaming in both places. Let's not mess with that.
yeah.
So
So
whatever you'd like to share.
Well, I figured since we're going to
Oh, no worry, Mama. It's so good to see you. Thank you so much for stopping by and for bringing your folks. I'll catch you soon.
I thought since we were gonna do Dana's auction on Saturday,
A little preview.
maybe we'd like check things out a bit because I'm not gonna lie, I haven't perused as deeply as maybe you have. And I did peek like super quick before we got on our stream and was like, wow, there's some really cool stuff in here. So I thought we could look at that. Like, what's funny is, so, in New England, you find a lot of quilts with the bedpost cutouts, but it's like a whole chunk cut out. Look at
that one just got the little circles.
Yeah, the little tiny posts. Even like, oh my God, this hexagon mosaic is really gorgeous. And Dana is also, her start bids here are really low. And you can get yourself, like, if you think, oh, they're quilts, oh, it's an auction, I couldn't possibly afford anything. That's not true. Like, you can really get some good deals, and Dana's shipping is also very reasonable. I think what is it, like $20 for one quilt and only $5 for each additional, something like that?
It's 20 or 25, and $5 for each additional. Yeah,
Like,
and I mean, yes, Jill's absolutely right. Dana's got low starting points, etc. But also, don't be fooled by those $10.
Oh yeah, no.
The day of, I am surprised that this close to the start date that there aren't, like, obviously this one's it's been bid up with the pre-bids, but I'm actually surprised some of those don't have pre-bids on them yet, or they've just got the $10 pre-bid. Because some of these often, and I feel like she front loads the auction with like the super expensive stuff. Like the stuff that she knows is going to bring, like, you can see the estimated price here is $1,000 to $2,000.
Well, and notice
that
too,
is not
her buyer's premium's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, it's 18%.
There was one auction that you and I were bidding in where the buyer's premium was like 29% or some jazz,
something
like
that. Yeah.
I see some that have 30, like it's really,
and that's like, when it gets up that high, you're almost like, even if you get a quilt for a deal,
yeah, I know,
it's still not a deal because of all of those fees.
This basket is so cool.
Yeah, I had my eyes on that one because my mother loves basket quilts, and I'm always looking for something fun for, gifts for her, birthdays and Christmas and stuff.
This album quilt too. Yeah.
Yeah, that one is a really good one.
Yeah, that's so pretty. And obviously, like, I'm not like going through here and like super scrutinizing the condition of the quilt, because far away anything looks fabulous, and then you go, oh, it's missing stuff. But just looking at the initial stuff here we got more red work embroidery, which we had recently been talking a bunch about.
That cut work quilt is amazing.
Which one? Up here, 16,
lot number 16. Yeah.
This one almost looks to me like just a piece of fabric in its perfection.
I mean, think about, like, yes, the digital printed things like that. I mean, it does look very modern in that aspect. I guess I don't even know what to call that, but it was that kind of sort of lacy looking kind of things. Like, I realize this is like, that's cut work as I don't know if this would be from Pennsylvania, but it's typically like the Sharon Schnitt.
This one says Vermont.
Does it say Vermont? Oh, duh, VT. But yeah, that's typically what that cut work is. If it's, but this is like really intricate. Pretty amazing.
some of the star stuff down here. Like, look at this, like in all the, like those tiny, oh my goodness.
Oh yeah.
I really like starburst stuff. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, obviously, since my business logo is the starburst of a quilt I have in my collection. There's a couple of like, look at this one. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Like to make one of these stars by hand and to
Yeah,
piece
it's a
all of that,
yes.
then to make a
Yeah.
bunch of small ones to go with it. I mean, it'd be a wonder I could survive the big star, let alone a bunch of little ones.
Yeah. I mean, those are even challenging from a modern perspective, even with because there's techniques that you can do to make those now that
You like strip and
where you're
cut.
using you're using a rotary cutter and you're matching points and stuff. But yeah, to have made them by hand
Yeah, because
without modern
bias,
convenience.
yeah, even now, like you said, with modern tools, bias is bias is bias. So
Mhm.
like that can be obnoxious on its own, and then doing it all by hand, piece by piece. And then of course we've got one of your Paragon kits.
I know.
Are you eyeballing a Paragon kit there?
I may be. You asked me the other day, what is my unicorn? My unicorn is the older Paragon Eagle.
Mm-hmm.
I've missed it twice now. Dana has actually had two of them come up for auction over the past year, and I missed both of them.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've seen at least two. This one's interesting. This one's cactus pot, but it looks, I mean, I could see why it would be cactus, but from far away it looked totally just basket to me.
I didn't know that's what that was called.
I didn't either. But I mean, yeah, I can see it. I can see it. And then here we've got some kind of a 1930s kit.
That actually has, I don't think it is, but it's kind of got Marie Webster vibes.
Oh, vibes to it. Well, let me
Yeah.
see if
I don't think it is one of hers, but it definitely has
it
those
did. Yeah,
vibes.
I can see what you're talking about. It definitely has some vibes. Oh, wait. Can I zoom that in?
Yeah, I can't see what that
A
says.
dramatic
Is that just-
rose. Oh, it just says dramatic rose.
It's just that particular quilt has been published.
Yeah, I was hoping.
That is what I can say. That is the beautiful thing about auction houses like Dana, who this is possibly a lot of these quilts are out of one person's collection. And so they will have those like provenance type of things, or the, where has this quilt been seen before? How many hands has this quilt passed through? Like she's got that kind of stuff documented in these. You don't always find that when you just go out and buy a quilt.
This star is really cool. Twinkling Star, 1880.
Yeah, it looks very scrappy. Like from a distance,
Oh,
it's
yeah. There you go.
But yeah, up close, it's really scrappy. I like that.
My purse is crying right now. Oh, look. There's the sunbonnet song.
I know. Oh my gosh, nobody's even done a pre-bid on it? Well.
Wow, looks like not.
And these are the little
these are cute ones.
Yeah, this is the little lady. I actually have a quilt that's her. I think I bought it from you.
Yeah. But I
yeah,
feel like these ladies are even scrappier.
And I like that checkerboard.
Yeah.
Around the border.
Can I zoom in? Oh, I can.
I don't think you can. I think that you can only do like the pop out and then back in.
That stinks, because I was gonna say it doesn't look like there's. Oh, is it signed? Yeah, it looks like it's signed. Let's see.
Oh yeah, it is. What does it say? 19.
This is 19. She's saying circa 1930s. This one's from Bobby Ogg. Cute, cute, cute. This is like a magic eye quilt. Oh, this is a cheater print. Is this your cheater print?
I don't think so.
Wow, that's a very intricate cheater print. I would not have expected that print to look so perfectly patchwork-like. Ooh, that's really cute. These baskets down here. I like the way that that's laid out.
Mm-hmm.
And so, excuse me, so far most of these are not
Yeah, I mean,
doing
you can see
anything
the
super
ones
high.
that people are definitely after because they've
Mhm.
already sort of bid them up with the pre-bids, but
Well,
I'm very interested.
anything that's got this purple already has a pre-bid on it.
Yeah.
But even those
Yeah.
pre-bids aren't, if the highest pre-bid is $10, that means only one person has pre-bid on it so
Mhm.
far.
Well, and my guess is that there are probably like some dealers that will come in and just put pre-bids on stuff because if nobody else gets it, then they can get it. Nobody
Yeah,
else bids it up, but
this is very interesting. This 1940s double wedding ring. That's very unique looking.
mhm.
I like all
And
these
it's
little
already, yeah.
circles.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever seen one like that.
I don't think I
Like,
have
it's an
either.
interesting one.
Yeah.
This is going to be an interesting auction.
Wow, lots of double wedding ring.
Yeah, anytime she's got quilts and textiles, it's
Oh, even more. Well, this one people are really excited about.
the pickle dish, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, with a high bid of 325, that tells me you probably got at least two people fighting over it.
And what's interesting is the estimate is only 200 to 400. So
Yeah. It's so funny. I mean, it really goes to show you that, like, while obviously auction houses try to, be good with their estimates, they still can't know for sure,
mhm.
what's going to be holy moly and what's not, because there are some things out there that I've seen at auctions that go for a buttload, and I cannot understand why. And then there's
Well, and
other
I think
things
in
that
some cases, yeah, you get like two people that are duking it out. And,
I have
and they've
definitely
like,
been in a couple of those fights.
but yeah, or then you just get like the perfect owner of that quilt happens to not be here. And so it just doesn't get bid on, or, gets a minimum bid.
Wow, this one's a double wedding ring, but from far away it looks like a star.
Because it's
That's
super
interesting.
scrappy.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it has something to do for me with the background. The background
Mhm.
blends into some of the fabric instead of being a
Right. Yeah.
high contrast. Um, yeah, I don't know that I've ever seen so many double wedding ring quilts in one place. This one's really pretty
Well,
too.
if those all happen to be, because I know sometimes, I mean, they're like the like a bunch of the quilts will be from the one, the collector that she's advertising, Bobby Og, but sometimes she's got other stuff she's filling in there from her inventory. But I would say my guess is Bobby Og I'm not sure if this is from an estate or that she's offered these up, but
Interesting, a
um
goblet quilt.
yeah, I saw that the other day when I was scrolling through. That was something I hadn't seen before, but my
Hmm.
guess is Bobby Og might have been a double wedding ring quilt collector.
Oh, maybe. Um, I like this scrappy one here too.
Yeah, those always catch my eye.
Yeah, I love a good orphan black. Oh my goodness, look at this star.
Mhm.
Oh, I like that a lot. I
And
like
there's
that
a few
a lot.
instances in here, and especially as you move on, where she's offering two quilts for each
Yeah,
auction lot.
yeah.
And I think sometimes those are like where they're not in as super, super duper good shape. They might
Mm-hmm.
have a few more flaws than.
Mm-hmm. Collide. Oh, this one was made by Bobby Og. Quite a few of these were. Interesting.
Actually, you know what? While you're scrolling, I'm gonna look and find out who is Bobby Og.
Yeah, because as I say,
Get my
it's not someone I'm familiar with, and there's quite a few here made by Carol Breyer Fowler too. Mini quilt. Another one, it looks like Mary Story. I don't know who that is either. So some here are contemporary quilts.
So I am thinking that Bobby Og Oh, no, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. So these are the estate of Bobby Ogg. It sounds like she passed away this year.
Mhm.
But up until recently, she was in some videos, and um she did some stuff through AQSG.
Mhm.
Or no, I'm sorry, AQS. This is not AQSG, this is AQS. Um, but yeah, Quilt Care. She wrote some books. Um, Price Guide to Functional and Fashionable Cloth Comfort.
Hmm.
Charm Quilts with Style. Yeah, so she wrote a number of books, and so it looks like she just passed away this year. So these must be from her estate.
This is going to be a very interesting auction. Some doll quilts, a group of 3 antique doll quilts. Someone is very interested in that so far. Um,
Oh yeah, for sure. I'd had those hadn't been bid on last time I looked. So
oh, we've got quite a bit here.
yeah, I'd forgotten that there was a number of these little small quilt
Yeah,
groups.
some of them are, it looks like some are antique and some are modern.
Hmm.
I like the little display for them. 4 animal themed quilts. That butterfly is really cool. Look at the kitty.
Yeah. You know, we looked at doll quilts the other day, so
Mm-hmm.
I've got doll quilts on my mind.
Mm-hmm. This one here is very interesting.
Hmm. I think all of those are newer contemporary quilts.
It'll be interesting to see what the contemporary quilts go for, because I feel like there is kind of a whole host of people that don't necessarily find them as valuable as antique quilts.
Or just not interested in them. But I look at contemporary quilts from the perspective of, does it catch my eye, and why? Why does it catch
Mhm.
my eye? In the same way that like an antique or vintage quilt, like why am I looking at this and going, what is it about it that is enticing to me?
And then we've got antique fabric. Oh no, it's
Mhm.
repro. Sorry, it's repro.
But I
Uh,
do think that she has some antique fabric in there, I think. Lots of orphan quilt blocks,
yeah, lots of
groupings.
stuff. Wow. And for
Mhm.
those of us like myself that like a good orphan block quilt, like
Mhm.
this right here, wow. You got a whole honk of them. These ones over here, these oak leaf ones are really cool too.
Mhm. Yeah, those aren't very nice looking.
We've got patterns, tons of blocks. Wow.
Mhm.
I feel like this is the like in this blocks too, this is a place where you could really get a deal with these mixed lot kind of things.
Yep.
Oh, look at these little patchwork collars.
Oh, yeah, I
This
saw those.
little
I
like
was like,
vest.
and I think those are vintage, right? Do they say antique or vintage?
Says
Yeah,
antique.
antique.
It says antique.
It's so funny, when Mary Fonz did, her quote clothing must die a couple years ago. It was a controversial video, but she talked about the collars, like the
Mhm.
patchwork collars, and some of them, I got to be honest, I don't know that I would necessarily wear something like that. I mean, I love a big collar. I love a statement piece, but I also don't like to look like a clown. But, so she kind of trashed the quilt collars, but my gosh, they were making them a long time ago too, I guess.
Mhm.
If this is accurate, an antique collar. So, mm.
Pieces of chintz. What are these? Bobby Ogg antique fabric reference books.
Yes, and so
Wow.
there's 2 sets of those. And then I think as we get further to the end, there's more fabric. Oh my gosh, I never
Ooh.
opened this one to look at.
Look at
It's
that
actually got
queen.
pieces. Yeah, she's got pieces of fabric in there. Ah,
Oh my. I have a feeling there'll be some fighting over this stuff.
yes,
Is that a centennial print?
absolutely.
Yeah. Look, I've never seen this centennial print.
Yeah, I haven't
I
seen that
currently have
one.
a quilt for sale with this centennial print right here. Um, wow. And also, you know who has centennial prints right now is Julia Kelly-Hodenius. Her site is Pique Trouver, and she has all her centennial prints like 50% off for the month of July. Just FYI. That is really cool. Let's look at the other set here. Also, to have these as a set, half of me is like, maybe I want to listed these all separately. Oh my God, look at
Yeah,
my
I thought these were,
conversation print.
yeah, I think these are pretty darn cool.
There's the infamous pink.
The double pink.
Yeah, these are really neat. Hmm.
Yeah, methinks there's going to be some fights over those two
Yeah.
lots.
Yeah. Lots of great antique fabric, loose fabric collection. Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff in here. Look at this crazy quilt. Ooh, I like the edge.
And see, I don't. I'm like, oh, things with ruffles and edges. Although this little guy behind me has, I don't know that I ever really showed this off. I bought it when I was in California. It's got this silky red.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'm assuming it is actually silk. It feels like actual real silk. But yeah, it's got this silky red ruffle.
There's
Very
actually
boudoir.
When I was at the New England Quilt Museum the other day taking pictures for us to look at, it's so funny. I was in Pam's office talking to her, and literally she gets off her, someone calls her, she gets off her phone, she goes, come downstairs with me. There was a woman bringing in quilts, 2 crazy quilts for the museum to be sold while I was there.
Ooh.
And one of them has a very interesting green finish ruffle type thing to it. Let's see, vintage sewing notions. More blocks, some wood block textile printing stamps. I got one of those. Ooh, this is pretty, this crib quilt here. The leaves and berries. Oh, these are really pretty too. The 2 tops. There's really something for everybody in this sale, isn't there?
Yep, for sure.
Look at these doggies.
I know, those little doggies are so cute. Yeah, and here's all of the actual antique fabrics,
fabric
12s and the
stuff.
centennials and stuff.
Wow, somebody's probably going to be busy shopping the sale for all the 12s. I know.
Yeah.
Patriotic
Patriotic textiles.
Yeah, really nice stuff here. American Beauty Rose Kit quilts. Look. That's interesting.
Uh-huh.
All right, I can't zoom in.
Yeah, I know. I was like,
Shucks. I could if I was on my phone. It's one thing I like about that pinch, pinch and open.
Yeah, so here are the swatch books.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
I think that's what the rest of it is, are these swatch books. And I think these are left over from, like she split them into 2 separate groups, and she had a lot of these in a previous auction. And I think they're from, it's someplace in New York. It's some textile place in New York, I guess, that
Now I wonder why these don't look very popular. Like, how come these haven't been, there's no pre-bid on this.
Yeah, I don't know. Somebody knows that Mia wants them, probably. I don't know. Our friend Mia, she has like the mother of all, and I believe she got it from a Dana auction. I mean, the book is like this thick. It's probably
it's huge. It might as well be a literal family Bible.
Yeah, I mean, it is huge, and it was put together by one person, right? I mean, it's not from a textile archive. It was built by a person.
So here's one for like silks and cottons. So like, is it like a whole book, or is it pieces of a book?
I think they're they've got multiple pages and such, but they're not like huge, and it's like all these different colorways of yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. I'm really gonna have and this is the auction that we're gonna
Indeed, it is.
stream on Saturday. So
Mhm.
some of these
Yep.
actually have, oh, they're from the 1970s. I was gonna say they actually still have the distributor on them.
Yeah, I want to say, yeah, there's that one from the 70s. I was eyeballing that because I do
This one up
have some
here.
of those. Yeah, I do have some of the there's some fashion industry magazines that would have pieces of fabric in them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a number of them from the 60s and 70s. I mean, it's hard to date polyester.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but one can try.
Wow, that is quite a fabric collection.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow. Wow.
So something to look forward to, you guys. So we'll be watching that on Saturday, which I guess this is a good segue before I leave. Just a reminder, we'll not be streaming on Thursday because we're going to do a co-stream on Saturday of this particular auction while it's live. We'll get started at 11 a.m. on Saturday. So, well, it's a little after 4.
We made it.
Yes, it's time for my midday Monday responsibilities.
I need to go eat food.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to grab some lunch before this. I'm a little peckish myself.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so hopefully you're joining us tomorrow as we finish off Crazy Quilts. And that will be on YouTube on the Quilt Nerding stream. On Wednesday on the Quilt Nerding stream on YouTube, we will be doing Needlework Nights, the paper needle books.
Mm-hmm.
I will be canceled on Thursday. I'll be canceled. I am canceling Thursday to stream on Saturday. And do not forget, Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern is my textile talk, which I'm sharing with the other Artist James scholars. So hope to see you there too.
Yeah, everybody, we got to show
With
up
that,
there. We got to show up
with
there in
that,
the chat to
yeah.
lend our support to Stephanie. One other thing to just mention before we head off is if you have been, since we've been talking about American Quilt Study Group while we're here today, if you have been considering attending seminar, joining AQSG, and you feel like you just like want a little more info before you take the dive, we did a live stream on the Quilt Nerding channel with the Executive Director Carrie Dell as our guest, and we went through the whole shebang, all the things that are included, up on the screen. We even went through the sign up process. We were even given a coupon code for people that want to join. That is seminar 24 in all caps, and that gives you $15 off a new membership, which is good through August 5th, 2024 for anyone that's watching this in 2026. The registration closes August 5th. So if you've been considering, now's the time to take the plunge. And Stephanie and I will be there, so you get to come hang out with us.
Yeah. And I'm putting the link into that video. Well, unfortunately, the YouTube chat is not working for me, but
that's all right. I'll stick it into the description later.
Yeah. If you're watching us through YouTube, you already know where to find us. Yeah, so well, with that, I will say adieu. Thank you guys so much. As always, we appreciate you so much. And
thank you.
Yeah, we love our buddies. So have a wonderful evening and afternoon, and we will see you tomorrow, hopefully.
Alrighty, everybody, don't melt.
Bye.
Bye.